Everybody, back to another edition of Draft on Tap. Adam, I think this is episode 8 that we've done
Yep,
now. I think
it
we
is.
missed one since we started here. Uh, that's Adam and Eva from the Burgundy and Gold Report, who is here with me every Wednesday. And our guest today is Ryan Fowler. Ryan, thanks for giving us a little time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Ryan, let's see. How you've been with the Draft Network for, is it 3 years?
Coming up on 3 years. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And you were with the Commanders first. What kind of spurred the change there?
Yeah. So I was with Washington, started out of college, did some PR, did editorial with them, a little bit of hybrid position. And then just things worked out to where I had an opportunity here with TDN and I took it and everything's been great since.
Let's real quick before we get on to some of the mock draft scenarios and guys that you may like, and I know Adam's got a ton of stuff. How many of the 30 visits does Washington have left now? Have they used all 30 or are there a couple left? I know we're close.
Man, I'm trying to keep track of all of them. Even
I know you do.
Washington, but every team. I'm not sure exactly what the exact number is as far as how many guys they've had, and I know they've had a bunch. Yeah, today is the last day for those top 30s.
Okay.
But what's great is that we're on the home stretch here, and it's crazy to think that we're only 8 days away from this thing. So exciting times.
It's crazy.
Yep.
The penultimate draft episode here, Adam, before we get kicked off next week. All right, let's get it started here, Adam. What do you have first on the list here?
I wanted to really talk about the cornerbacks because I know that there's been a lot, like depending on what site you go, Gonzalez and Witherspoon and Porter or whatever order you're 1, 2, and 3. But after that who are guys that you think are on that fringe, maybe mid to late first round, second round that, really fit what Washington's looking for? Because I think we've heard a lot of kickback regarding Porter might not be best suited for what Del Rio is running. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like Joey Porter. He's won a lot of the time at Penn State just by being the best athlete on the football field. He's got some technique concerns, and there's some laziness concerns around the league as well. But I think getting into a young defense like Washington has and bringing out the best in him, he made it look very easy at times at Penn State. I love to see that, whether offense or defense, just guys that make it look very easy. But Deonte Banks from Maryland is a guy that I love. He was in my mock that I did. He was guy I took at 16, someone that I will not be surprised 3-4 years down the road, guys, that is the top corner out of this class. Love his game. But guys that could be potentially in late round 1, day 2 that deserve more attention. Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. There is no corner in this class or defender really in general that has the ball hawk ability that he has. There's nobody in the same stratosphere. And a day and age where you just got to get the ball back to your offense because most points wins. At the end of the day, Emmanuel Forbes fits that bucket. And then, again, young Washington defense with a bunch of playmakers. But a name that hasn't been talked about a bunch, really two guys. One is Garrett Williams from Syracuse, a guy that tore his ACL for Syracuse back in October. He's supposed to be fully healthy for training camp and moving into the fall. And I think he's someone that is high on boards. I know specifically with a couple teams I talked to, high day 2 grades on him. And right now he's looked around that 3rd round bucket. I love his game, love his ability in the run game as well, and to play zone especially. And then Keitrell Clark from Louisville. I don't know if he's going to live in nickel, guys, at the next level, but he can play some outside has some outside versatility, And then you watch him at the Shrine Bowl. He was by far the best corner there out in Vegas. It was really easy for him, stronger kid as well. So those are a couple guys, along with DJ Turner. From Michigan too, plays like a safety, but he's only 5'11", and no one's gonna be able to outrun him running 4.2. So those are a couple guys I like back end of round 1, early portions of round 2.
When we talk about these mock drafts, I think it's interesting because purely from a fan standpoint that puts together, goes to the site and does a mock draft, and they're kind of picking like team needs or this is who I would take, but you guys that do this and have connections around the league are more asking around about what teams are actually thinking about doing or what are smoke screens. What are some of those things that you're hearing now? Because, like the other day, I was told that teams, like actual people, decision makers, not nearly as high as CJ Stroud as, say, the media is, or those that do mock drafts simply for doing mock drafts. Tell us a little bit about the process about how you kind of slot guys to different places, and maybe where the casual fan gets kind of misconceives what you guys actually do?
Yeah, so I think a lot goes into it. I think it's trying to find not just you look back to the 80s, the 70s where you're drafting a guy and hope he fits. But nowadays it's scheme fit is so important. And even specifically with Washington with Eric Bieniemy in the building, even for me, I'm trying to reach like every resource I got as far as find a place where Washington's going to go on offense or where they're going to go really at 16 because guys still up in the air for what they're going to do. But even specifically with the whole CJ Stroud Carolina thing at 1, I have a very good contact with Carolina. And just a few months ago, even at the combine, they were in love with Will Levis. I mean, he was QB1 atop their board. They loved Will Levis. And then over these last few weeks, it's been all Bryce Young. So then you hear the CJ Stroud stuff. And this is really also the time of the year, guys, where you're just like, can we please get to the draft? Because teams are throwing out smoke screens, like you said, Doug, all over the place to try to get teams to trade up or trade down when really, is it tangible or is it not? So just trying to gather everything that you have from pro days, combine, film, guys with top 30 visits, that's actual tangible interest from teams, not just, hey, we're going to bring you on a Zoom call. Those are fine, but bringing a guy into your facility, that means something. So it doesn't mean you're going to draft a guy, but that's actual interest that you can bank off of. So it's a very strenuous process. It's draining. It is, but it is the best time of the year. And like I said earlier, we're at the home stretch. And finally, next Thursday, when this thing kicks off, it's finally can establish these guys on rosters across the league and then really begin to peel the layers back of how they fit on offense or defense or special teams for a lot of these teams.
So quickly before we move on, what as we sit here now, then who do you think the Panthers take at number 1? And was it necessary to give up? I mean, you mentioned a guy like Will Levis. It doesn't feel like it was necessary to give up that kind of draft capital if the plan all along was Will Levis, right? So as we sit today, what do you think the plan is for them?
I absolutely think it is Bryce Young, quarterback from Alabama. He is, for me, he's the top quarterback on my board. I'm not getting cute just because he's small. He's played against bigger guys his entire life, won the Heisman in the SEC. I don't have, I mean, there's obviously concerns there about durability, of course. But just turn on the tape and watching him play, I think he is the first overall pick for Carolina.
I do too.
You know, I think you've seen all the Washington fans, offensive line, they're saying no matter what, 16, they're taking offensive line. But let's say, they go the cornerback route and then we get to the second round. I know there's a significant drop off from the tackles in the first round and the second round. That's where I think they'll start looking at an interior line. What do you think of the idea of, we've seen Chase Roullier 2 years in a row on IR, Granted they brought in Gates, re-signed Larson, but again, these aren't guys that I think are long-term options. In the second round, you have a guy like Schmitz from Minnesota, a couple other guys in that range. Do you think that that's something that they would consider? Consider Roullier still on the team. He hasn't been asked for a pay cut, which surprised me as well. What do you think about that situation?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Washington ultimately does within the interior because, like you mentioned, they have a lot of bodies in there, and even a guy like Sadiq Charles, where they're still trying to drag it out with him. I've just never been a fan of Sadiq. Remember, we drafted him to replace Trent Williams years ago out of LSU, and that never works. They fell on their face in that aspect. But I think Chase could actually play guard if he needs to, and I think at 16 for me, guys, by the way, I don't think they need to go offensive line at 16. If they do, it won't surprise me. I don't know as far as a left tackle with Charles Leno. I think they like him. I think they want him to be left tackle. But you look on the right side with obviously your Andrew Wiley solidifying that right side, Gosme bumping into guard. Then you have that versatility in the interior with Roulier and Norwell at left guard, who was fine last year, not crazy good, but he was fine. And then you drafted Chris Paul. And I mentioned Sadiq Charles and Tyler Larson's back as well and Nick Gates. So there's a lot of guys along that front five. I think they can do a multiplicity of things. But you move back to 47 and even some names to know as far as Jalen Duncan, local kid from Maryland, excellent in pass pro. Not the cleanest prospect in the class, but the tackles guys really drop off from that top tier of the Paris Johnsons and Broderick Jones. It really drops off. So and that's where Jalen Duncan and Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse at 47. Those could be options there, but I don't think Washington is going to be locked in as far as taking offensive line just because they have to. If there's a guy on the board that they like, whether it's a corner or maybe a tight end.
It's interesting because each year that Rivera has been here, like the fan base has been keyed in on one position of need. they haven't come close to taking any of those, right? I mean,
Right.
Jamin Davis kind of came out of nowhere. Receiver last year kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. Do you see any crazy moves this year? It feels like the fan base is either, tackle, cornerback, or bust. Can you see one of these where everybody's looking this way and Ron goes that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with two positions, and that's tight end and it's running back. And I know you guys have probably heard the buzz as far as Bijan at 16. And I want to be the first one to say that, look, you draft a guy like Bijan Robinson with that talent, you should not be mad at all. Now, there are bigger needs on this football team than running back right now. And that's where I kind of come in with that. But Bijan's a special talent. And if he's there at 16 and that's their guy, then by all means, go get your guy. But also at 16, if you're sitting there and you take a guy like Dalton Kincaid from Utah, tight end, an elite flex weapon, my top tight end on my board. Just his ceiling is immense in this class. And I think we just know how important the tight ends are in Eric Bieniemy's offense, not just with Travis Kelce, but Noah Gray, Blake Bell, Jody Fortson, Michael Burton over the last few years as far as that H-back, fullback role in that offense. You got to get guys that can move the needle and change mismatches and create matchup nightmares on offense. And I just don't see the tight ends in Washington right now doing that. And the best athlete they have in the room right now is Armani Rogers, by far. He is their best athlete, just extremely unrefined. You turn on the Indy game, you turn on the Green Bay game and see his potential. A really good athlete, but I as far as out of the blue, I mean, yeah, Dalton Kincaid at 16 would surprise some people. Wouldn't surprise me because most points wins and make it easier on Sam Howell as far as more weapons on offense.
And this particular team, I find this fascinating. I think 2 times over the last 18 years, they've averaged over 20 points per game in a season. They didn't get over 20 last year. So while I have been and I think I speak for both Adam and I on this one, I think we have both been against doing tight end or running back in the first round. The more and more of these draft shows we've done, I think the more and more I've been convinced that maybe, if Bijan is this Saquon Barkley-esque or a LaDainian Tomlinson-esque type guy, that maybe, particularly in a world where you're not big on giving out second contracts to running backs, that maybe if you're looking to score the very most points you can, not a terrible idea. Better value to go tackle in the first or cornerback in the first round and tackle in the second round, the other way around, or does it not matter? Do you have a different idea of what the first and second may look like?
Yeah, I think the latter, right? I would, for value purposes, I'd go tackle first, corner second, just because of how deep this corner class is. You can grab guys on day 3. Now, I don't want to get misconstrued as far as the talent level. There is a difference between a guy like Christian Gonzalez on day 1, or you move back into day 3 with guys like Nick Jones from Ball State or Miles Brooks from La Tech. There's a difference in athlete there, a different ball player. But as far as from a value perspective, at 16, right, Darnell Wright from Tennessee is obviously a popular name. DeJuan Jones, I don't see that fit. He had a top 30 with Washington that he canceled, did not come to Washington because of Andrew Wiley in the building. That's what I was specifically told.
Really?
Yes. So he didn't come to his visit, but that's why the tackle class kind of gets me a little confused, right? Where Washington wants to go, because Darnell and DeJuan are both right tackles. Do you want a Broderick Jones? Is it going to be a left tackle like Paris Johnson? He's got a lot of technical deficiencies that I see in his game that I'm not the biggest guy of Paris. I'm not the biggest fan of Paris Johnson right now. His evaluation hasn't been too clean for me. I want to see him refine some things at left tackle. So, but for me, from a value perspective, just specifically, I would go tackle at 16 and then look for a corner at 47 where there are a lot of names to know.
That would suggest that they have told Wiley that he'll be the right tackle next year.
Correct.
Or
Correct.
given every opportunity. So this notion that they draft the kid from Tennessee and kick him into guard. He didn't take that money. And I mean, it's not like the money prohibits you from drafting a right tackle at 16, right? But that information makes it that's the first I've heard of that. So that's surprising me, because I thought all along, well, right tackle signing Wiley should not prohibit you from drafting right tackle. I've said that for weeks now. That is a difference, though.
Right. And even with Darnell too, I mean, he started his career with Tennessee at left tackle. So I think he has, it's easier said than done. But I think he could also play left tackle if need be.
Interesting.
Piggyback over talking about Bijan Robinson in the first round. Who are some late round guys you like? We've talked on the show about Tajay Spears, Keaton Mitchell, 2 guys that I evaluated. Other than those guys, who are some later round guys that you think fill that role for Washington, because everyone's saying, they have Robinson, they have Gibson, but Gibson's a free agent next year, and McKissick was released. Who are some guys that you've had your eye on for good fits for Washington in that late day 2, day 3 range?
Yeah, I was going to say late day 3, mainly in Xavier Valade, transfer from Wyoming to Arizona State's got a bunch of attention. Rashad White came out of Arizona State last year and had a heck of a first season for the Buccaneers this year. Was a good rookie running back. To him come in to be an RB3, potentially change of pace, guy that maybe some special teams value. A guy like Jaleel McLaughlin, a kid from Youngstown State. He's historic success for the Penguins, like over 8,000 yards in his career, rushed for over 145 a game, has that build to him like a J.D. McKissick, even like a guy like Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State, call it smaller pocket rocket type of running back, if you will, offer some value on special teams because, guys, we have not been able to figure out, Washington hasn't been able to figure out punt returner and kick return since really Brandon Banks was in town. And I know you guys remember Brandon Banks because he was fun. I know he's 140 pounds soaking wet, but man, that kid, once the ball was in his hands, he was electric. But as far as guys that can be running backs and a special team, Evan Hull from Northwestern, I really have enjoyed getting to know Evan during this process. And at the Senior Bowl, he was really good. Guy that can create inside the tackles, outside. He was the main piece for Northwestern on offense these last few years. And teams knew he was getting the ball, and he would still get 80, 90 yards at 6.5 yards a pop. Not the biggest guy in the world, but someone that'll stick his face in pass pro. Reminds me a lot of when the Washington signed Jarrett Patterson, UDFA out of Buffalo a couple years ago. A guy that just does a lot of things well and won't complain anything that you ask him to do. So those are just a few guys.
While we're at running back, everybody that watches this knows I'm a Georgia homer. Where does my guy Kenny McIntosh kind of fit in? What day do you think he goes? Because to me, he does everything that the NFL wants you to do right now and did it at Georgia without complaining, waited his turn.
Yeah, Georgia continues to pump out running backs, right? And they probably got another one in Kendall Milton coming out. But yeah, Kenny is going to be, I think he's going to be a late day 2 guy. So round 3. I just want to see him play with a little bit more juice, specifically inside the tackle. Sometimes if it's not a clear runway, he gets a little bottled up. I want to see able to use his feet a little bit more in his vision, be able to bounce back and hit those cutback lanes. Plays with the physicality that I love. All those Georgia guys do. You don't play physical at Georgia, you're just not going to see the football field. And that's really the SEC as a whole. But I like Kenny's game. He's going to be a late day 2 guy for me and someone coming to be an RB2. I'm in a complimentary backfield.
Maybe like 3 weeks ago, I had mentioned that if Hendon Hooker was still there in the, when we're picking in the second round, you got to at least think about it. And then I guess yesterday, right, he came for one of their 30 visits. He's an interesting prospect to me. That when he was at Virginia Tech, not good, but that Virginia Tech team was terrible.
Yeah.
And got to Tennessee. And, my brother is a Tennessee alum. That's a whole different story. But they had basically told him he was so worried about making mistakes that they basically had told him, you're never going to get at the field because that's not the offense we run here. They got him in the offense, which is also a thing that a lot of people are worried about, right? Nobody has really had success in the NFL coming out of that offense. He was going to win a Heisman last year if he didn't get hurt. Where are we with Hendon Hooker? I've heard he's as high as 3rd on people's quarterback boards. Where is he on yours? And should Washington be looking at quarterback that early?
Yeah, he's QB4 for me, behind Bryce, CJ, and Anthony Richardson. Will Levis is my 5th quarterback on my board. But Hendon Hooker, you mentioned it, Virginia Tech. People don't like to go back to that Blacksburg tape because it was ugly. But for me, that's the guy that's been battle tested. It's a guy that's consistently shown improvement and someone that's willing to work. Now, I completely understand as far as Tennessee and that Josh Heupel offense, where it's extremely spread out horizontally. You're not going to have those looks at the NFL level, but you watch him, just his poise in the pocket, his feet, footwork, his arm strength. I would like to see him use a little bit of his lower half, a little bit more in the pocket. But he also has that dual threat ability to where it's not run first, it's run second. Keep those eyes up and make throws off platform if he has to. But for Washington's perspective, I just don't see it. I don't think it's a fit. I like Sam. I like Jacoby as a veteran that could start potentially a couple games for you. And we just can't sit here and say that it's going to be Sam and Jacoby for 17 games or more because the carousel has continued to turn in Washington for a long, long time. So there may be an unknown name, and that may be a Hendon Hooker. Guys, who knows? We don't know who's going to – it may be one of us 3 that's under center. for the burgundy and gold next year. At this rate, we just really don't know. But just for Hendon Hooker's perspective, I like the kid. I like his game. I think he's going to project extremely well to a Detroit, a Minnesota, a team that can have a guy come in right away and not just compete for snaps, but also produce. But yeah, Sam and Jacoby right now, for me, are QB1 and QB2. And I wish the best of luck to Hendon wherever he goes.
Real quick, Adam, before you get on to your next question, I'm curious, Ryan, your thoughts on this. I was talking to Craig Hoffman last week about this idea that 25 is too old. Like, where are you on, breakout age is a thing. And a lot of NFL scouts and decision makers are big on it. Now, to me, if you get 5 or 6 years out of a guy and he's only 31, 32 years old,
Right.
You're happy with that, right? I mean, most guys are happy to get through one of those. I guess the concept from him is, well, why did it take you becoming a 25-year-old man to beat up on younger competition? That's not how I see it, but I'm curious how you view this whole ageism thing in football.
Yeah, for me, you just mentioned it. You get 7-8 years as a performance ceiling for him, maybe more if he really develops. 7-8 years, that's almost a decade of good football, and that's what I'm betting on. And a thing with Hendon too is you're a quarterback and you come in and you're a potential top 35, top 40 pick. You're going to be a potential face of the franchise type of guy, and it's much different coming into a locker room and leading 19, 20-year-olds and coming into a locker room leading grown men with families to where they have paychecks and they're feeding family. That's what matters. And I think that is what an intangible with Hendon, that at least with my conversations with him, just how he's family oriented, high character kid. Now, I'm not going to come in here and judge a guy's character. I'm not going to do that. Talk to him as a football player, really impressive individual. And I think that's going to matter in a locker room, not just leading within a locker room with your voice, but then going on in between the hashes and leading as well. So the age isn't a concern for me. He's going to come in, I think, compete and produce right away. And I think some people also think of the Brandon Weeden stuff from years ago coming in. He's a much better player and prospect than Brandon Weeden was. And like you mentioned, Doug, you get 5, 6, 7 years out of this kid, more so in the latter of the 7 years, the upper ceiling of that as a good football player under center, because I think he's extremely smart. He takes care of his body, and just as someone that really carries himself like a professional, and he is extremely mature.
To piggyback off the quarterback situation, the realistic situation, which I think is Washington, looking at a guy late day 3 undrafted, Dorian Thompson from UCLA is a guy that we keep hearing through Washington Nation. I've seen some really good things I like and some really head scratching things in his tape. What was your walkaway opinions from him, as a potential developmental late round guy for Washington?
Absolutely. I love DTR. I love his game. Athletic, right? Fits what you want to do on offense. And you look at Eric Bieniemy and the athlete. I mean, I'm not going to sit and compare anybody to number 15 in Kansas City, because I obviously fell into something great with him as an athlete and football player. But DTR and his success at UCLA in Pac-12 and a Power 5 conference, just an extreme athlete. And I think one thing, guys, that goes overlooked is every single year, Martin Mayhew, Ron Rivera love guys that are high-level athletes, high RAS scores, no matter the position. And DTR is that guy. You want to come in and be a guy that maybe work on sub-packages, some unique looks. I think you look at the early portions of like Marcus Mariota's career, what he was able to do in sub-packages in Tennessee and then Atlanta a little bit. DTR coming in as a day 3 guy, some practice squad reps. These last few years, we've had guys like Jake Fromm and Steven Montez. He's much better at players than those guys. And I think when it comes down to it, as we mentioned earlier, with the carousel type of quarterbacks that we've had in Washington, he's going to be that guy that sits in the rearview mirror, and it says it right there. It says objects in mirror may be closer than they appear. He's got some of those boxes that you'd like to check off at the quarterback position, especially a dual threat guy that has elite athleticism.
You're excited. You're right about the RAS score soon. I'm excited because we're going to have Kent Lee Platt, the creator of the RAS system, on next Wednesday. So really excited to hear what he's got to say. A lot of the tackles that we're looking at, huge RAS scores, including your guy from Maryland. If they don't go secondary in the first round, will a guy like Keely Ringo make it to 47?
I think he will, guys, because the league doesn't know just yet if he's going to find his niche at corner or at safety. He's stiff to me in his lower half. Linear plane north-south. I love the speed that he has. He's a track guy. You could tell he also plays fast. Uber physical within the 5-yard contact window, but he has got to be able to change a direction is very lumbering. Whether that's losing 5-10 pounds, you also don't want to take away from his fundamental strength that he does have that allows him to succeed in that contact window. But for me, I think he's going to be there at 47 because just the league, again, is it at safety? Is it at corner? There's a lot of things for me that I just want to see more of, but he does check those boxes for playing inside that 5 to 7 yard window, being physical and overpowering corners. And then the old adage on the outside, right? If you're even, you're leaving with receivers. Well, you're not going to outrun a guy like Keely Ringo when he can pick up the speed, but he's got to get better at change of direction for me.
Adam?
Yeah, as far as, I know we were talking about, some of the interior guys that Washington has right now. What do you think the chance is that Norwell's even in camp? Because, I think we only saw a small sample size from Paul, but I really liked him when he was coming out, being able to play on the outside and inside. Realistically, do you think that left side is between Norwell and Paul or in a draft pick? Or, do you think Rivera will just go with the steady veteran who's been subpar at best?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've appreciated with Ron over the last few years is bringing in guys to compete for snaps. Snaps aren't, they're not given, they're earned. I love that mentality with him. But I think day 3 is a spot where Washington should add some interior guys. And I think there's some guys there, Antonio Mafi and John Gaines, both from UCLA are athletes that I really like and potentially be steals in this class. Anthony Bradford as well, guard from LSU, is a really good player. So I think they should get a guy in the building late day 3, whether that's round 4, round 5, or if they like a guy in round 6. Guys slip, guys rise. So I think at that spot, adding more bodies to compete, it never, ever, ever hurts to have those types of guys. And Andrew Norwell, look, he's not the youngest guy in the world, not the oldest guy in the world, but just getting guys to compete always helps.
Were you surprised that Cosme didn't work at right tackle?
A little bit. I am a little bit disappointed. Yeah, coming out of Texas, a high-level athlete, really good hands, the ability to force a guy back to the inside, re-anchor. He may need those bumpers, though, at right guard. That may bring the best out of him, having the center to his left hip and the right tackle to his right hip. But I still like Sam. I hope it works out in Washington because, look, high day 2 pick on the guy. You have expectations. He's got to produce. And he's got to stay on the football field as well. That's the biggest thing with a lot of these guys working into year 3. Benjamin, Sam, they just got to reach that performance ceiling by staying on the football field. So I hope it works out with Sam. If it's guard, if it's tackle, I don't think it's going to come at tackle because Andrew Wiley's in the building. So, but I mean, I am a little bit disappointed in Sam, and I expect him to hopefully reach that performance ceiling this year because it's a massive, massive year for him wherever he plays.
We've talked a couple of episodes now about the idea of maybe not drafting corner in round 1, but one of these hybrid corner safeties that Washington loves so much. Do you have a couple of those in mind? Maybe some of those that may be in the first, or some of those that may be around in the second if they go a different round. And your thoughts on Percy Butler coming into what is this, year 2 for him?
Yeah. Look, Percy at Louisiana Lafayette was a guy that played a lot of single high, showcased that range. Doesn't have a lot of the bulk that you see from Derek Forrest or Cam Curl come down and play in the box a ton. So I think he is going to live right kind of where Bobby McCain did at the roof of the defense. But for me, if that's 16 and Washington wants a guy that can play some safety, play some nickel, play some outside, and that's Brian Branch from Alabama. And you guys know that the Tuscaloosa to Ashburn pipeline is always fruitful this time of year. So yeah, that's a player that may be he's one of my favorite players in the class. And as far as 3-4 years down the line, one of the premier defenders from this group. I think he's going to live at nickel. I don't want him living on the outside against 6'1", 6'2" X receivers at the next level. But just a guy that is just fantastic at nickel, super smart. This may not be a smarter guy. Maybe Sidney Brown from Illinois is safety as far as just smarter, more cerebral than he is, just understanding what he's looking at offensively. I think that's a big transition period for a lot of guys that are younger that come to the NFL that still don't understand what they're looking at. We saw that with Jamin Davis his first year especially. So Brian Branch, Yasir Abdullah is a very interesting player for me from Louisville. Do you guys remember Josh Harvey Clemens from Louisville? Longer guy, more of a linebacker, but I think Yasir could play. He could do a lot of different things at all 3 levels. And I know he lived primarily a kind of 5 tech for the Cardinals, but losing a little bit of weight and playing at that second level, especially long, physical, be physical in coverage as well. He's a guy that I found really interesting throughout this process. So he's much different player than Brian Branch is. Brian is a corner, 100% nickel guy, play in the box, play high if you want to throw some unique looks, blitz him off the edge. But Yasir Abdullah is just a very interesting individual because I don't think he was used correctly a lot of the time at Louisville.
I was so disappointed they didn't get it right with Harvey Clemens when he was here. Adam, did you tell me that you thought that you saw a little bit of Minka with Brian Branch when we talked about him the other week?
The versatility aspect.
Yeah.
Of, free safety nickel, but I agree 100% with Ryan. I don't want him on the outside. I really want him to make his living in nickel, which I think he can do. But as piggybacking on that, have you heard? Because there was a lot of chatter going on during the pre-draft process about Branch. Let's say making some career decisions, with when it came to tackles in the box and, about his overall love. Have you heard anything about that? Like for his love for the game? Because, again, I don't like to put out rumors. Just a lot of people I talked to that were close to Alabama, some of the teammates kind of were whispering that they questioned if it was more about, the game itself or is just, the money he was looking for.
No, I haven't heard anything along those lines from Brian. Just going off of what I have heard and what I've seen on tape is a kid that I think will fit specifically what Washington wants to do, which is ball players and physical ball players at that. Again, I like his game. I like the kid, and everything I've heard is positive.
The one position we haven't talked about, and I think it's maybe more important or should be talked about more than a lot of people have been talking about, is defensive end.
Yep.
How early do you think this team will add one? They've got to. I mean, there's no way that they can keep both of those edge guys that they have right now. To me, if you're not drafting one this year, then you're falling behind. Give us a couple guys we should be looking for.
Yeah, Chase and Montez have to be pushed, and I don't think that's coming from James.
Well, that's fair too. That's right.
Yeah, William Bradley King and Shaka Toney, and all respect to those guys. I like what they've been able to do rotationally, but whether that's at 47 guys or maybe they trade back and get some extra picks.
Right.
A guy I really like that I think will be there at 47 is Felix Anaduke-Uzoma from Kansas State. I think he's one of the most explosive guys in the class, and he will come in not just as a DPR, but rotation as that third guy that could start for you. It's extremely explosive and extremely nuanced as a pass rusher. And another guy I really like is BJ Ojulari. He's a day one guy for me. I don't think he'll be there at 47, just a guy I really like. But as we move back into the later portions of round two and into day three, two guys is Tavius Robinson from Ole Miss. Watch him at the Senior Bowl, Canadian kid, someone that has a tremendous, tremendous upside. And we know Washington and really the NFL as a whole likes taking guys out of the SEC. A lot of success for them, can play 3-tech, can play 5-tech, really good hands, great feet, mirror and match guys, good counters for his hands. Good in the run game, ask him to seal the edge. He can do that too. So that means he can play on first down, second down, third down. Don't have an issue there. And then Yaya Diaby from Louisville blew up the combine. Yeah. Extremely explosive. Always the first one off the ball. Really good young man. Impressive when you speak to him. Just someone that you get in the room with Chase and Montez and just along the whole defensive front with John and Deron and Ryan Kerrigan running the meetings. Those are guys I want him to work under. And you got to get guys that you can never have enough guys that can push the pocket consistently. And we still have yet to see Chase and Montez reach the performance ceiling together. Right? We saw from Chase's rookie year, Montez was fantastic last year, but we'd love to see them put it together both as a whole. But I need to see them get some guys in the building that are going to push these guys to reach their performance ceiling, because if you're not going to play up to expectation, then we got to move on.
Let's get you out of here on this one. Tell us where you were and what you were doing when you heard Dan was selling.
Yeah. I think I was eating lunch or something, whatever I was doing. Look, it's I've tried to kind of stay away from the logistics a little bit. I mentioned my background. I was with Washington at the time. But yeah, it's obviously a good day for the organization. And the biggest thing for me, guys, is focusing on football. We haven't been able to do that for a long time. Just too long. I was born in the late 90s. I haven't been able to see the glory days of Washington. A couple of years here and there, a couple of players here and there. But I want the football people just to be able to do their football jobs and raise this organization back to what it once was. Maybe it never will get back to that with Joe Gibbs and what it was and how the city revolved around the burgundy and gold. But let's just hope we can focus on football and raise this organization back to expectations, because I'm excited for this year and moving forward.
I am too. Ryan, tell the folks at home about the podcast, when it drops, and what they can expect when they're watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my podcast, Commanding the Huddle, on Spotify. Apple Podcasts comes out every Monday, and then during the year, episodes every Tuesday and Thursday as well. And then you follow me on Twitter if you don't already, _Ryan Fowler. And then all my written, more audio and video content is at thedraftnetwork.com.
And we'll put links to all of that when the show drops. Ryan, thanks so much, man. We always appreciate the time you give us here at the show. As always, it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
Take it easy.
And Adam, I'll see you next week, buddy.
All right, brother.